Forbidden palettes, the revolutionary use of toxic pigments in Victorian portraiture. In the grand salons of Victorian high society, beauty was not merely displayed, it was engineered. Portraits shimmered under candlelight, skin appeared impossibly luminous, and fabrics glowed with a richness that seemed almost supernatural. To the untrained eye, these works were the height of refinement. But behind this visual perfection lay something far less romantic. Poison, not metaphorically, literally. The most admired colors of the Victorian era were often built from unstable, toxic chemistry, pigments that did not simply fade with time, but actively harmed the people who created and lived with them. What we now recognize as aesthetic brilliance was, at the time, inseparable from chemical danger. The glow of death. Among the most infamous pigments was Scheele's green, an arsenic-based compound that produced a vivid, almost electric green. No natural dye could match its intensity. It did not whisper color, it glowed. Draperies, wallpapers, gowns, and even painted backgrounds achieved a richness that felt otherworldly. But that glow came at a cost. In poorly ventilated rooms, especially candlelit interiors where humidity and heat interacted with the pigment, microscopic particles could be released into the air. Over time, these luxurious interiors became environments of slow exposure. The very spaces designed to represent refinement could quietly undermine health. Victorian galleries and drawing rooms were not just visual spaces, they were chemical environments, where beauty and toxicity coexisted without distinction. Viewers admired the shimmer without realizing that the shimmer itself was unstable. And Scheele's green was only one part of the palette. Lead-based whites, mercury-derived reds, and other heavy metal compounds formed the foundation of Victorian color culture. These were not marginal materials, they were central to the visual identity of the era. The luminous skin tones in portraiture, the soft atmospheric haze behind aristocratic figures, the illusion of purity itself, all depended on substances we now recognize as hazardous. The price of perfection. Victorian portraiture was built on a paradox. The closer an image approached ideal beauty, the more it relied on imperfection in its material reality. Artists often worked in prolonged exposure to pigments that affected their health over time. Chronic symptoms, fatigue, neurological issues, respiratory illness, were not uncommon among those who handled such materials daily. Yet the demand for visual brilliance rarely wavered. Patrons wanted radiance, and radiance required risk. Even sitters were not entirely removed from the consequences. Interiors painted with arsenic-based greens, for example, could slowly degrade, releasing compounds into dust and air over years. What was meant to preserve status and beauty sometimes contributed to unseen deterioration within the domestic space itself. The Victorian home, often idealized as a sanctuary of refinement, was also a site where aesthetics and chemistry were dangerously intertwined. The chemistry of beauty. What makes this era so unsettling is not only the toxicity itself, but the normalization of it. There was no clear boundary between art supply and hazard. The pursuit of visual perfection outweighed understanding of long-term biological impact. Color was not yet fully governed by safety standards, it was governed by availability, intensity, and demand. So artists pushed forward, they mixed, layered, and experimented with substances that today would be strictly controlled. And in doing so, they created a visual language defined by contradiction, beauty that depended on instability, elegance built on chemical risk. Conclusion. When beauty becomes a substance. Victorian portraiture is often remembered for its elegance, soft lighting, delicate fabrics, composed expressions. But beneath that surface lies a more unsettling truth. The aesthetic ideals of the era were inseparable from industrial chemistry at its most volatile stage. These were not just images of beauty. They were artifacts of transformation, where art, science, and danger overlapped in the same brushstroke. And so we are left with a final question. When beauty requires poison to exist, is it still beauty, or something closer to a controlled form of decay, frozen in paint?